My dear friends, sometimes in life, no matter how much we try, our words fail to heal. We explain, we argue, we justify, we cry, yet the wound remains open. But there is something far more powerful than words. Something that often does what even the sweetest sentences cannot, and that is distance. Distance is not always disconnection. Distance is sometimes the medicine that gives time for hearts to breathe, for egos to dissolve, and for wounds to naturally heal. Remember, this silence doesn't mean weakness, and space doesn't mean the end. Often, it means a new beginning. My dear friends, have you ever noticed sometimes when two people are upset with each other, they try to solve it immediately with words? One says, "Let's talk right now." The other says, "No, leave me alone." And then the talking begins. What happens? Instead of resolving the issue, it often becomes worse. Why? Because words spoken in anger don't act like medicine. They act like salt on a fresh wound. Think about this. If you have a small cut on your hand and someone pours hot chili powder into it, will the cut heal? Of course not. It will burn more, it will sting more, and the wound will take longer to recover. Similarly, when the heart is hurt, pouring words, sharp, heated, defensive words, only makes the pain sharper. Many people believe, if I explain myself enough, the other person will understand. But when emotions are high, the ears are closed, the heart is shut, and the mind is blocked. It's like trying to explain poetry to a person who is drowning. They don't need poetry, they need air. Sometimes, silence is more powerful than speech, because in silence we don't create new wounds. In silence, we don't add fuel to the fire. Let me share a simple story with you. Imagine a husband and wife having an argument. The husband says, "You never listen to me." The wife says, "Well, you never understand me." And back and forth it goes. Each word becomes heavier than the last. Each sentence becomes sharper than a sword. By the end of the fight, they both forget what the issue even was, but the hurt from the words remains. The argument ends, but the echo of the words lingers in the heart like scars. Now think, if at that moment, instead of speaking, one of them had chosen silence, instead of fighting with words, they had chosen distance, maybe the wound wouldn't have grown deeper. My friends, words are like arrows. Once released, they cannot be taken back. And the truth is, sometimes we speak not because we want to heal, but because we want to win. And in the process of winning the argument, we lose the person. That is why distance becomes so important. Because distance stops us from saying things we'll regret. Distance stops us from adding new wounds while the old ones are still healing. Distance gives us a chance to keep our love safe from the damage of our own tongue. So remember this, when the heart is bleeding, don't rush to speak. Don't rush to fix it with words. Sometimes the kindest thing you can say is nothing. My dear friends, have you ever noticed? When you're standing too close to a painting, you only see the brush strokes. You see the rough patches, the cracks, the tiny flaws. But when you step back a few feet, suddenly the same painting looks beautiful. What changed? The painting is the same. The brushstrokes are the same. What changed is your perspective. In the same way, when we are too close to a conflict, too close to our own hurt, we only see the flaws of the other person. We only see the brushstrokes of their mistakes. But when we create distance, when we step back from the situation, we start seeing the bigger picture. Let me share a little story. A young man once fought with his best friend over a very small issue. Words were exchanged, tempers flared, and both walked away in anger. The young man, full of pride, said to himself, "I will never talk to him again." That night, he was restless. He replayed every word in his head, every insult, every reaction. But then, after a few days of no contact, something magical happened. His anger began to fade. His mind began to calm down. And when he looked back, he realized the fight wasn't as big as he had made it. He asked himself, "Do I really want to lose years of friendship over one heated moment?" That realization came not from more words, but from distance. When we are inside the fire, we only feel the heat. But when we step outside the fire, we can see how small or big the flames truly are. Distance allows us to measure reality. Many of us, in our relationships, try to solve everything instantly. We want immediate closure, immediate answers, immediate apologies. But my friends, the truth is, hearts don't heal on deadlines, they heal in their own time. And distance provides that time. Have you noticed how astronauts view Earth from space? When you and I look at the ground, we see problems. We see traffic, pollution, stress, noise. But when astronauts look at the Earth from space, they see beauty. They see one small, glowing blue planet, fragile and united. What changed? The Earth is the same, but their distance gave them a higher perspective. Similarly, in our relationships, distance lifts us above the noise. It gives us altitude. It allows us to see that maybe the fight was small compared to the love. Maybe the mistake was temporary compared to the bond. Maybe the anger is strong, but the connection is stronger. My dear friends, distance doesn't mean we don't care. It doesn't mean we are abandoning someone. Distance is simply stepping back so we can return with a clearer mind and a softer heart. It is pausing the argument so that we don't destroy the relationship. Remember, this proximity creates intensity, but distance creates clarity. So the next time emotions run high, instead of rushing to fix everything with force, take a step back, give space, allow distance. Because what words cannot show you in the heat of the moment, perspective will reveal to you in the calm of silence. My dear friends, do you know the most dangerous sentence in human relationships? It is not, "I hate you." It is not, "I don't love you anymore." The most dangerous sentence is, "I am right and you are wrong." The moment that sentence enters, ego has entered. And when ego comes in through the door, love quietly slips out through the window. You see, the problem is not always the problem. The problem is usually the ego attached to the problem. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine two people fighting over which road to take while driving. The husband says, "This way is faster." The wife says, "No, that way is shorter." Now, both may be wrong, both may be right, or both may be equally confused. But the fight is not about the road anymore. It becomes about who wins the argument. That's the power of ego. It converts small disagreements into big battles. Now here's the truth: when egos collide, no amount of talking helps. Because words spoken under ego are not spoken to understand, they are spoken to conquer. They are not spoken to connect, they are spoken to dominate. And what happens? Two people who love each other begin to act like enemies on opposite sides of a battlefield. This is where space becomes a healer. When we create distance, when we step away from the battlefield, the ego begins to shrink. Why? Because ego needs an audience to perform. If there is no one to argue with, no one to prove wrong, ego slowly loses its energy. Think about fire. Fire needs oxygen to keep burning. Ego needs conflict to keep surviving. When you take space, you cut off the oxygen, and slowly the flames of ego die down. Let me share a small parable. Once there were two rams on a mountain. They met on a narrow path, and each one refused to move aside. One said, "I will not step back. I am stronger." The other said, I will not move. I am greater. They locked horns, pushing, shoving, refusing to give way. Hours passed, but neither was willing to let go. Both were exhausted, bleeding, and stuck in the same spot. Now imagine if one of them had simply stepped aside, let the other pass, both would have continued their journey without harm. But ego made them prisoners of their own pride. Doesn't this sound like many of our relationships? Locked in battles where nobody wants to step back, nobody wants to give space, because stepping back feels like losing. But my dear friends, stepping back is not losing. It is choosing peace over pride. It is choosing the relationship over the argument. That is why space is powerful. Space reduces ego clashes because it interrupts the fight. It gives us a chance to breathe, to reflect, to realize, maybe this argument is not worth my peace. Maybe this fight is not bigger than my love. When you take space, you are not surrendering to the other person, you are surrendering to wisdom. You are choosing healing over hurting. You are allowing the ego to dissolve so the heart can speak again. Always remember, in relationships, the goal is not to win against each other. The goal is to win with each other. And sometimes, the only way to win together is to step back, create space, and let the ego rest. My dear friends, have you noticed something very interesting about our emotions? In the heat of the moment, they feel like a storm. They feel permanent, unbearable, unstoppable. But give them time, and suddenly the storm becomes a drizzle, and sometimes it disappears altogether. Think about it. The last time you were very angry, furious, red in the face, trembling with rage, didn't you feel as if you would never forgive, never calm down? But after a few hours, maybe a day, maybe a week, your anger softened. Why? Because time is the great healer of intensity. When milk is boiling on the stove, what do? We don't argue with the milk. We don't scream at the milk. Stop boiling, stop overflowing. We simply turn off the flame and wait. With time, the milk cools down on its own. In the same way, when emotions are boiling inside us, anger, hurt, frustration, if we keep adding words, if we keep stirring the pot, it overflows. But if we step back, give space, and allow time to pass, the boiling calms. Let me share a story. A young woman once had a huge fight with her sister. In the argument, she shouted, "I never want to see your face again." Her sister shouted back, "You are dead to me." At that moment, both believed those words. Both believed the relationship was destroyed forever. But then a few days passed. The young woman looked at old photos, childhood memories, moments of laughter. Slowly, her anger began to feel smaller compared to her love. By the end of the week, she said to herself, "What nonsense! How can I throw away years of love over one moment of anger?" Did the love come back through more arguments? No. Did it come back through explanations? No. It came back because time softened the intensity. My dear friends, time is like water over a burning coal. At first, the coal is fiery, but pour a little water, wait a little while, and it turns into harmless ash. Our emotions work the same way. They are fiery in the moment, but harmless later. That's why rushing to resolve a conflict can be dangerous. When we rush, we speak while the fire is still raging. We make promises we can't keep. We say words we don't mean, and later we regret them. But when we wait, when we allow time to pass, the fire weakens, and suddenly forgiveness becomes easier, compassion becomes possible, and clarity returns. It is often said, don't make permanent decisions on temporary emotions. Why? Because emotions are like waves in the ocean. They rise high, they crash loudly, but they never stay forever. Time ensures that no wave, no matter how big, lasts endlessly. So, The next time your emotions feel unbearable, don't try to solve everything immediately. Don't force the other person to talk right away. Instead, step back, allow time to pass, because what feels like a mountain today may feel like a pebble tomorrow. What feels impossible to forgive in the moment may feel natural to forgive with time. Always remember this simple truth: time doesn't erase love, but it does erase intensity. And when intensity fades, love has space to breathe again. My dear friends, have you ever realized that silence can be louder than words? We often think silence means weakness. We think silence means we have nothing to say. But in reality, silence is not empty. It is full of meaning. Silence can say things that even the most beautifully crafted sentences cannot. Sometimes silence says, "I value peace more than winning this argument." Sometimes silence says, "I refused to add fuel to this fire." And sometimes silence simply says, "My love for you is bigger than my need to prove myself right." Let me give you an example. Imagine two people fighting. One person is screaming, shouting, throwing words like daggers. The other person is calm, composed, and silent. Who looks stronger? The one who is shouting or the one who is silent? True strength is in silence, because silence requires self-control, and self-control is the highest discipline. Silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. There's a small story of a monk who was once insulted by a man in the marketplace. The man shouted at him, mocked him, called him all sorts of names. But the monk stood quietly, not reacting at all. After some time, the man got tired and left. A disciple who was watching asked the monk, "Master, why did you not say anything? Why did you remain silent?" The monk smiled and said, "If someone gives you a gift and you refuse to accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The disciple answered, "It still belongs to the giver." The monk said, "Exactly. His anger, his insults, they are his gifts. By staying silent, I refuse to accept them." That, my friends, is the power of silence. It protects us from carrying the burden of someone else's negativity. Silence also gives us dignity. Words can make us look small, but silence makes us look tall. Have you noticed? Great leaders, wise people, spiritual teachers, they don't waste words in arguments. Their silence carries authority. Even in relationships, silence can be the greatest healer. A couple may fight, but when one chooses silence, not out of arrogance, but out of love, it prevents the argument from escalating. Because words add fuel, silence removes it. Silence becomes the water that cools the flames. Silence is also a teacher. When we stay silent, we start listening. Not just to the other person, but to our own heart. We hear what anger was trying to hide. We hear what pride was trying to cover. We hear the truth beneath the noise. Let me share one more thought. In music, what makes a melody beautiful is not just the notes. It is the pauses between the notes. Without silence, music would just be noise. Similarly, in relationships, it is not endless talking that makes it beautiful. It is the right balance of words and silence. So, my dear friends, remember this: when words can hurt, let silence heal. When words can break, let silence protect. And when words can confuse, let silence bring clarity. Because sometimes silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is the deepest form of communication. My dear friends, sometimes the greatest damage in relationships does not come from what we feel. It comes from what we say in the heat of the moment. Emotions rise like a storm, and if we are not careful, we release words that cannot be taken back. A hurtful word, once spoken, cannot be erased. An angry outburst, once unleashed, cannot be undone. And though we may apologize later, the wound remains. Think about it. If you break a glass, you can glue it back together, but the cracks will always remain visible. Similarly, harsh words may be forgiven, but they are rarely forgotten. This is why distance, in moments of conflict, is such a powerful medicine. It prevents us from causing irreversible damage. Let me share a simple story. There was once a boy with a very bad temper. He would often shout at his friends, insult people, and say things he didn't mean. One day, his father gave him a bag of nails and told him, "Every time you lose your temper, hammer one nail into the fence." The boy did this for weeks, and soon the fence was full of nails. Later, the father said, "Now, every time you control your temper, remove one nail." Slowly, the boy removed all the nails. When he proudly told his father that the fence was empty again, his father said, "Yes, but look at the holes. The nails are gone, but the scars remain." My dear friends, our words are like those nails. We may remove them later with apologies, but the scars remain in the hearts of those we hurt. That is why distance is so important. When we step back, when we allow ourselves time and space, we stop ourselves from hammering those nails in the first place. We stop ourselves from creating damage that no sorry can fully repair. Imagine this. A husband and wife are arguing late at night. Both are tired, both are angry. If they continue talking, they might say something extreme, something they don't really mean. Perhaps he might say, "I regret marrying you." Perhaps she might say, "You've ruined my life." These words are not true, but in anger they escape.